fairly broad. It includes agriculture and freshwater and fisheries and oceans work. So I'm really pleased to be focused on this panel today. We've talked a lot about livestock methane this week. One of the things that we know at Environmental Defense Fund is that acting now on methane is the most important thing we can do in the short term to buy time for addressing the long-term CO2 issues, right? So methane is 80 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas, but it's short-lived. So acting on methane now buys time. At EDF, we spent a lot of time working on oil and gas methane. Livestock, agricultural methane is contributes more methane to the atmosphere than oil and gas methane, something on the order of 40%. The vast majority of that coming from the livestock sector. We think a lot, and we've talked a lot this week about solutions that are triple wins. Solutions that address our climate pollutants, solutions that protect and enhance livelihoods for farmers and other producers all around the world, and solutions that continue to provide critical nutrition for people in communities around the world. So I'm really pleased that this session places the emphasis on that second and third component of that triple win dimension of addressing the agricultural methane challenge. So with that, we're going to have Ertharin deliver a few comments, and then we'll bring our panelists up. We're missing a few right now, but we hopefully will acquire them as we go through the next hour. If not, we'll have more time for Q&A and engagement with the panelists that we have. And so with that, I would like to introduce Ertharin, Ambassador Ertharin Cousin, who is the CEO and founder of Food Systems for the Future, and recently a great partner of ours, and we've been really pleased to be able to work and spend more time with Ertharin and her team. Ertharin.
Thank you very, very much for that very generous introduction, and thank all of you. You all have got to be tired, okay, because I know I am. And it's Food Day, and it's almost the end of COP. And some of us are feeling quite frustrated because we had 150 countries sign into a declaration, yet in the stock-taking document, we're not going to have very much there that relates to nothing regarding food systems. We know we may get food, we may get agriculture, but we have a lot of work to do. That is if there's a message that we want to leave here with, it is that we've made progress because there was a food day. There is a declaration with 150 countries on it, and the language in the declaration begins to catalyze the work that we need to do to bring countries along with us. And that gets us right into this methane conversation, because if 150 countries signed, the other 45 countries, why didn't they sign? And part of the challenge is one agriculture minister said to me, he said, Ertharin, methane is the price we pay for food security. And for us right now, food security is more important. And the challenge we have is that we have a narrative that would suggest that there's a trade-off, that you can't do food security and greenhouse gas reduction, emissions reduction. And that's a false narrative. But I blame us for not building the case for governments, and not just for health ministers and agriculture ministers, but for environmental ministers, of the opportunities that are available in the food system. And I always like to start off with, but it's not just about cows. Even if the majority of the methane does arise from cows, from cattle and livestock, we know that in order to address this challenge, we are going to need a diversity of solutions. That does include sustainable livestock management. That does include new feeds that support less methane production from cattle, but also includes solutions like alternative, what we call complementary proteins. And because it is about increasing the availability and affordability of proteins. Because diet diversity, as we in the food security community talk about greenhouse gas reduction, we must always couple it with nutrition and sufficient access to food, affordable foods. It's also, though, about issues related to rice and rice production. And I know that Bayer's not here, but they will speak about the new tool that they're bringing online that is for direct-seeded rice that reduces methane emissions by 30% and cuts the water necessary for supporting the cultivation of rice by some 50%. We need all of those solutions to come online. It is not an or, it's an and that is required. But what we also need is a measurement, a reporting, and a verification system that is cost-effective, that is supported by the policies and regulatory system that is necessary to ensure that we can measure the changes that we make, that we have baselines, that we measure, and that it is verified. Now, that is important, not just to verify that we are, in fact, moving and making progress on greenhouse gas reduction, but also for increasing the climate finance capital that is available for supporting the changes in the food system that are required to scale up all of the efforts that I've just described that support our ability to eliminate methane as a challenge in the food system. We've all know the numbers that only 4.8% of climate finance today goes to food systems. That unless it, as is often said, that it meets all three of those goals, that we will not have the transformation as necessary. We will not have the support that is required from all of the actors. So measuring what we do, but let me take a step back. Embracing the diversity of solutions and recognizing that whether that diversity of solutions, though, is only valid if we have baselines of where we are today, and we have measurement systems that allow us to track the progress that is necessary, but that also ensures that we can maintain the viability of our food systems. So all three of those are required if we are going to ensure that any action that we take as the work that is necessary for us to really begin to address the challenges of methane emissions in the food system become a reality. I'll just end with this. As we sit here today, in 26 countries around the world, 50% of the population cannot afford a diverse diet. In 12 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, 90% of the population cannot afford a diverse diet. If we are going to address the challenges of greenhouse gas reduction, particularly methane, which is so directly related to protein production, we are going to need to develop solutions that are in line with and to create a pathway forward for addressing that access to affordable, nutritious food, ensuring access to a diverse diet, particularly for the most vulnerable people, so that we're leaving no one behind. Other than that, we are not going to get the support that we need from countries to get this into their country action plans. And we will continue to come back to these COPs and feel like we could have done more. So that's the work that I'm asking all of you to join us in doing between now and the next COP, is to begin to put those systems in place so that we have examples of what is possible by the time we get to COP 30. Thank you.
Thank you, Ertharin. And Ertharin, we'll keep you up here as we bring up the rest of the panelists. Okay, so with that, and thank you so much, Ertharin, for those really important stage-setting comments. Let me bring up our panelists, and I'll just briefly introduce each of you and ask that if you want to share a little bit more about your background, you do so as we enter into questions. First, Karen Ross, Secretary Karen Ross, Secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. We don't have to be that precise, but you're welcome to do that. Second, Fiona Flinton. Fiona is a senior scientist at the International Livestock Research Institute. Fiona, welcome. And Jayant Kadsi. And Jayant is the vice president and the head of livestock research at BAIF. Thank you all for being with us. So let me just, and what I'll do is I'll ask each of you a question, allow you to elaborate through answer. I may come up with a follow-up. If not, we'll work through a first round of questions, and then we'll open things up to the audience. So for Secretary Ross, California is estimated to export about $2.5 billion worth of dairy products annually, providing important nutrition to people around the world. At the same time, California has been a leader in supporting dairy farms to reduce their methane emissions. So can you talk about some of the successes California has seen in working with farmers to reduce methane emissions? And what are the next set of plans to further reduce methane emissions for California's dairy sector? And I will give you this microphone.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. I always enjoy listening to you. Inspire me every time, so thank you. So yeah, California is the #1 dairy state in the United States, as well as the most productive agricultural state. We specialize, especially not only being big in dairy, but in tree nuts and fruits and vegetables are like the specialty crops that we are really excellent in. I will say we've had very good luck working with our dairy farmers. They have been real leaders, but I will say back in 2013 when we passed a law that mandated a reduction in methane emissions, including not just from landfills and not just from oil and gas, but also a 40% reduction in methane levels from 2013 by 2025. And 2025 is right around the corner. And so we worked very closely with the dairy sector, with the families who wanted to lean into this, but were scared to death of how this was going to happen, by saying, we will partner with you, we will invest in you to help you make this transition. Because transitions that completely change practices do not happen without a significant investment. And that's why the discussions at this COP are so important, talking about financing, financing, financing. We chose a route that is incentive grants, so that it was still voluntary for the dairy families to do what they wanted to do. We focused, because of the kind of dairy systems that we have, large number of animals in small spaces. Dairy digesters were a tool for us, and so over $200 million since 2014 has been invested in dairy digester technology, where professional developers will come in and put that on so the farmer can continue to be caring for the cows, growing the crops. But this has become an alternative revenue source to help keep the whole farm sustainable so the family can stay there, by generating renewable electricity or renewable natural gas, which has been important, especially with our low carbon fuel standard, as a way that has a market to do this. So that has been a signal to other dairy families that this is a technology that is in fact working, that it also provides important additional revenue, because dairy is a volatile business, ups and downs all the time. And we also recognize that for our smaller dairies and our North Coast dairies, dairy digesters may not be the most viable tool for them. And we also have an alternative manure management program, which is all about that connected economy, taking that valuable byproduct from a cow, in addition to the milk, extracting those nutrients, which in this case is in the form of compost, as a way of displacing very expensive synthetic fertilizer. So that was another win-win-win, another revenue source. These are the programs that we have stood up. We've had tremendous success with these programs, over $90 million at this time in alternative manure management practices. To date, of the projects that are already working of our dairy digesters, we calculate that that'll be the equivalent of 23 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, which are methane. That's important. On that side of it, we're more than halfway to our goal of a 40% reduction. And then on alternative manure management practices, it's about 1.3 million metric tons that are being reduced. The next phase in all of this is enteric fermentation, which all of the world is looking for the solution. We hope that our Food and Drug Administration will have a registered product to be able to start to do the trials on feeding this feed additive early in 2024. But that's the next chapter in all of this. But I can't say enough how important it is. It's been the leadership of our dairy families working within their entire sector on sustainability that they have been leading the way. And we actually now have one dairy that they installed fuel cells when they put in their digester that's now in the hydrogen business. And that, I think, is that's the next best hope for us to achieve the state's carbon neutrality. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's okay.
That after I give long answers.
But I'm just going to ask you to clarify two important points because I think that you said, we talked a lot in the last session, for some of you were here, about how to pay for this transition. So it sounds to me like in California there was first a regulatory driver, but then money that was allocated through the state.
Which is critically important. In our state, we chose 2 decades ago to use a cap and trade system, which generates billions of dollars in the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Fund, and that is what has been funding most of these incentive grants. Now, when we had these one-time extra revenues from our capital gains realization tax, which is not happening this year, I'm just saying, but a couple years ago it was very robust. We've also been able to devote some general fund dollars to that. And now we also have, through USDA, there are still funding streams coming through USDA. These are critically important. This shows others that this is doable, that it is a way of enhancing revenue streams on the farm and helping you achieve those things. But having early capital from the government, but it only pays a portion of what the total cost of a dairy digester is, as an example. And we are attracting matching dollars from the developer community. We're showing them the leverage so they can go and capitalize these things with loans or securing public dollars.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just want to welcome Dhanawat Tiensen to the stage here, the Director of Animal Production and Health Division at FAO. And Dhanawat, we'll come back to you in a minute, so we'll give you a chance to gather your breath. So I want to go to the other end of the spectrum, to Giant. So India is the world's largest dairy producing country, but its system looks quite different from California's. And so in smallholder-based systems, what are the key approaches to helping farmers adopt practices that deliver these triple wins we talk about of improving animal production, enhancing nutrition, and reducing climate impacts from livestock?
So before answering you, I will brief about my organization. I am representing BIF Development Research Foundation. It is a non-government organization. Since last 55 years, we are working for rural livelihood through income generation from livestock-based program, as well as NRM, National Resource Management-based program. And so initially it was through crossbreeding program, then genetic improvement of our local breeds. And India is first in milk production. Even livestock bovine population is the largest in India. We have around 19% population of the world and almost 3% of the land. So all the feed fodder deficiencies are there. Even the quality is also the issue. And what we are doing actually in our program, we try to improve the breed of the animals by selection of the best animal, and So we have a coverage through our own network. So almost we work in 16 states through a breeding center, what we called. So classically, a breeding center covers around 8 to 10 kilometer radius, covers around 2,000 breedable cattle population. And such we have 4,000, more than 4,000 breeding centers. Every year we do around 5 million insemination, almost 1 million elite progeny is born in our program. And besides these, we are having approaches for optimization, herd optimization. So recently we started with sex-sorted semen technology. Similarly, the other approaches like in feed supplementation, we advise the farmer ration balancing. At the same time, with the help of National Institute of Animal Nutrition and Physiology, it is under ICAR. So it has developed a product called Haridhara. So it is having the potential to reduce methane emission by 18 to 20% if you feed to the animal. So it is a feed supplement. So as we are also partner doing this research, and it is a patent by the government of India, and we have the license to produce the feed supplement. So we are also producing and supplying to our participant through our network as well as to other agencies. Then one more approach like based quality feed and fodder resources. We also have a R&D on that. So like we have released best varieties of Napier, which is a high producing, at the same time less oxalate content. We have varieties of pearl millet, which is having a dual type of thing like food and feed together. So we can have one or two cuts for a fodder, and third cut we can go for grains. Similarly, one more thing like dung management, we have developed, so biogas is there obviously, but for a small and marginal farmer, which who is having only one or two cattle in his house, so we have one biogas unit which is having a 2 cubic meter capacity, which is sufficient for one family. And whatever the output from that biogas comes, what we call like a renewable energy for sustainable agriculture. So that slurry we are separating into solid and water. So solid again we are putting for vermicomposting, and water we are using it for biofertilizer production. And such more than 2,000 units are under operation with a very small and marginal farmer. And this program we are actually promoting with the government of India initiatives also. Yeah.
So, can you just say a little bit about sort of the uptake or the level of penetration of some of these strategies across India?
Yeah, like for Haridhara, recently we have started. Just from this April we have started, and more than 100 metric ton we have supplied. And for this biogas we have more than 2,000 such unit. Similarly, we have other like-minded organizations, so we are supporting them also.
Excellent, thank you. So, Fiona, still another type of livestock production system exists that we haven't discussed yet. Pastoralists. So, can you, and often the most vulnerable to climate impacts, these pastoral systems, how should we be thinking about supporting pastoralists to address methane emissions while also building resilience?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. And I think we're really only just starting to think about the mitigation pathway as well as the adaptation pathway. But yes, it has to be addressed, and we have to start thinking about it. There are about between 100 to 500 million pastoralists in the world, depending how they're categorized. They're mainly found in rangelands, grasslands, shrublands, which ecologically speaking cover around 54% of the terrestrial surface. So we're talking big numbers. And, pastoralists really provide the service of converting what are very poor resources found in these rangelands. I mean, particularly in Africa and Asia, many of those rangelands are poor quality grasses, poor soils, scrubby vegetation, and pastoralists are producing food from these lands that really cannot be used for anything else. But with 4 to 5 units of livestock as a functional livestock unit. And with those numbers of pastoralists, of course, we're talking about significant amounts of livestock. So in the emissions discussion, we do need to start thinking about how we can also move to reducing livestock emissions within these systems as well as in other systems. But the starting point is very different, and as you said, these pastoralist communities really are the ones that are bearing the brunt of climate change in many ways. We've seen increased incidence of drought cycles are shorter. If animals manage to get through a drought, then when the first rains come, there's normally floods, and those weak animals, are then hit by the floods. So these issues, the starting point is different, and really any steps to mitigate livestock emissions within pastoral systems absolutely need to go in hand with adaptation as well. And the good thing is, this is absolutely possible, and really this is what we're seeing. We've seen a lot of investment in climate adaptation and trying to help pastoralists to adapt to climate change and the other stresses that they're facing, the new challenges that they're facing. And many of these steps, these processes, these activities, these technologies also have mitigation wins, because most of them are about improving the productivity of the livestock. So if we can improve the productivity of the livestock, then we're reducing the emissions per animal. So yes, in short, mitigation needs to happen, but it needs to go hand in hand with climate adaptation. And we as a research center, that's the direction that we're moving in, working with international partners and of course the communities themselves, agencies, etc. But this is where we're moving, and there are very practical solutions, whether it's improving feeds and forages, community-led breeding programs, improving land management, rangeland management. All of these have these adaptation and mitigation wins, as well as improving nutrition and incomes at the same time. But one particular bottleneck that we don't often think about is, particularly in pastoral systems, pastoralists have very insecure rights to their land and to their resources. And so that incentive really to invest in your land isn't there. Why should pastoralists improve their rangeland if they're not sure that they're going to be able to use that rangeland next year or in 5 years' time? So this is also something that needs to be part of the discussion, in that pastoralists need to have security of access to assets that they need to be able to adapt and be able to move along a mitigation pathway as well.
Yes, thank you. And I actually don't think it's that different. Maybe California is the outlier from the motivation perspective, because I think in both India and with pastoralists, the motivation is first and foremost health and productivity and nutrition, and then you get the methane benefits as almost a byproduct of that. But I do want to we talked about the tenure right issue in the last panel too, and I do just want to follow up on that and say, what is that path? What is the pathway to a more secure solution there? Is there one that's within reach?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some very good examples of tenure security projects, initiatives for pastoralists. Actually, Tanzania probably has the most progressive policy and legislation in this regard, where all villages, livestock-based or other, need to go through a village land use planning process. Once that land use planning process is developed, then certificates of customary rights of occupancy are issued. And we've been working with pastoralists so that where villages share resources across village boundaries, we help them to plan together to maintain that shared grazing land. And then the communities are then able to receive a group certificate of customary rights of occupancy. So the privatization of land doesn't happen. They still have their collective, they're still managing their resources collectively, because this is such an important coping strategy and management of these dry lands. You know, you can't manage dry lands as individuals, because otherwise one person will end up with a dry season grazing and another ends up with a wet season grazing. So there are initiatives. The problem is, you know, we're talking geographically large areas of land. Often these lands may have important minerals or potential important minerals here, and governments are reluctant to provide pastoralists the tenure security that they need. But really, without that, you know, it's very difficult for them to be able to invest in taking steps forward.
Thank you. Okay, Dhanawat, we gave you a minute to catch your breath. We're glad you made it, because you have a lot to share. I participated in your launch event the other day. So the FAO did recently issue both a technical report and a pathways report documenting solution sets. And some of them we've touched on. Can you talk about these reports and how you hope they will be used to accelerate, it says here methane reductions, but let's keep the focus on these triple wins: accelerate livelihoods, accelerate nutrition, and accelerate methane reductions?
Thank you very much, Eric. Last 2 days, no, 2 weeks. Last 2 days, when we launched the report together, and we know that our focus is on solutions, and that's why we know that we don't talk much about how much the livestock sectors make contributions to greenhouse gas emissions, whatever. We're talking about billions tons of greenhouse gas emission that livestock sectors contribute. But we want to see, if we want to bring it down, because in the report we already show you that if we do nothing today, until 2050, we will reach 9 billion tons. But if we follow all the mitigations, solutions, we can bring down to 1.9 billion tons. And even though we can do better, because we know that from today, tomorrow, and next year to go, we can have more solution, we can have more innovation, technologies. And also we know that all solution is synergies. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It can be 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. And that's why now is the time to take action. And I'm very happy from colleagues from California to mention that it's a joint effort from all sectors, from producers, farmers, and also with the local government or federal states, to make sure that we can bring solution and we can finance and we can support our consumers. When I joined FAO since last year in September, before that I was the permanent representative of Thailand and also the chairperson of Committee on World Food Security, CFS. Had an opportunity to talk with farmers and met a lot of civil societies and so on. And over the past years, when we talk with our farmers, they ask us, they are a problem or they are solutions. They are producing food for all of us. But they say that they see no futures in some countries. But when you go to India, when you go to Africa, our farmers have a billion future. I just came back together with my colleagues from International Dairy Federations that we went there together. And when we see how the government of India put the investment to support farmers, and we see the result. And even though FAO received 40,000 record of small-scale dairy farmers in India, and we put in our model, the model is really show that when you put the intervention, when you put the solutions, it really reduce the impact. And even though by next year, we will obtain more around million records. But now it's not enough to get the only data from India. But we also want to get the data from US, from Canada, from Australia, from Europe, or from Africa. To highlight that, once we implement, once we take bold action, the result will show us, and the result will explain by itself. And that's why this year, when FAO organized the Global Conference on Sustainable Livestock Transformation last September, we're talking about how the sectors going to build science and evidence narrative to advocate sustainable livestock. How are we going to promote adoptions of best practices and all solutions together? And also, when we go back to about finance, we also need to make sure that we can develop enabling policies and also responsible and also promote responsible investment for sustainable livestock for all sectors. And we need to work together in the whole supply chains and whole value chains and we have a full package that we can deliver to our producers, farmers, and also members countries. And that's why it's a time to take action. Because if we take action today, tomorrow, and next year, we will talk about result that how much we make progress together. And that's why the Global Conference on Sustainable Livestock will be part of the stock taking of UN Food System Summit to highlight every 2 years that now livestock sector making progress. And also the work of Eric and the team and also others initiative will be a collective actions that we can show result, that we can showcase what we make progress together. And that's why I'm sure that by 2030, we need to show that livestock sector reduce the impact, livestock sector reduce the emission, livestock sector increase efficiency, livestock sector increase economic growth. And that's why you are here. And also you see that from this morning until now, already 6 sessions that I talk, even though I met some of you in different sessions. Because it's always livestock is everywhere talk about livestock, but please, we will continue to do better together.
Dhanawad, I wish you'd show a little more passion for your work. Okay, I'm going to ask you one follow-up question, but I'm also going to alert the audience that we're going to go next to audience questions. But the follow-up question, and I don't mean this as a softball, so I want you to think hard about this. What, over all of these sessions the last couple of days since release of the report, have you heard that has most sort of surprised or intrigued you?
Actually, I can say that since I decided to join FAO and take the positions, let's say livestock directors at FAO, we know already livestock is a sensitive issue. And I take my own risk. Because I don't want to see our farmers and producers who are feeding us, ask all of us, they are a problem or they are a solutions. And if we don't talk with them and we don't work with them, who else will work with them? And that's why I'm sure that our farmers and producers, private sectors and government have to join your effort to move forward, to bring better result. And that's why all the 3 wins that you mentioned, it will happen because our solution is there already. And even though the report already show that we can bring it down, even though we can bring down to 0 if we put more effort. And also if all of you bring solution, bring innovation, we can do better and we can feed more people that we know that by 2050, almost 10 billion who are going to produce. And that's why we have to say that they have a lot of system, but we need to also take all system together.
Thank you. So, audience questions. Yes. Back there, and then we'll come to you. We'll take these 2 questions, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Thanks a lot to everybody for the very interesting insight. I really admire your enthusiasm and your positivity on this. I'm much more depressed. I'm much more less optimistic. Um, I'm a PhD in agricultural law, and I'm following closely the European legal development, especially at the food and agri-food level. And I follow, for example, the EU nature restoration law discussion. And as we were saying at the beginning of this panel, there's a narrative of giving some much more importance to the food security threat compared to the climate commitments. And this watered down all the legislative and all the pledges that are doing at the European level, but also at the UN level. So my question is still, how do we communicate the science behind the greenhouse emissions behind the livestock sector? Like, it's very clear that the impact of the livestock sector in terms of greenhouse emissions, and still we see that all these negotiations are watered down because of, for example, food security issues that, for example, in Europe are really misleaded and have a lot of political connotations. Even the farmers are, and the farmers' representation do this lobby pressure on this. So how do we really communicate this?
Thank you. So two parts of that question I think I hear is one is sort of striking the right place between the tensions of livelihoods and nutrition versus addressing the greenhouse gas issues, and then there's a communications dimension to that. Jennifer, we'll get your question, and then we'll go back to the panel.
So Secretary Ross, the new Enteric R&D grant program that you're launching, what's the hope? What's the intended dream?
I think when it comes
Yeah, we'll go with that one, and then we'll come back.
Okay,
to that.
sorry. Yeah, I was like, I was talking.
Since it was
I was talking to
specifically.
you asked me, I was going to answer. It's great that there's a product that's about to be registered by FDA from all indicators, and that could be available in early quarter of next year. But there's not just one solution because of all the different types of systems that we're dealing with. So we want to see what else is out there, because science, technology, and innovation, we're not going to be able to address climate change without that. And so we want to collect this. We want to make sure that we're all using some standardized way of measuring. And we want to make sure that there's consumer confidence as we go down this pathway of, I think there's a lot of work that's already been done on that, but we shouldn't make any assumptions that because we came up with an answer that it's going to be accepted by consumers. And we want to continue working on the next best iteration of this. So we really don't want to stop with one that we're very fortunate is in the registration process. We want to make sure that we're looking at, especially as we think about connected economies and we think about all of the opportunities to better understand what's going on inside of a cow. And she's a great recycler. Some of that's going to be helpful and some of it might not be, but I think we just want to be open to making sure we believe in science, technology, and innovation to help us address these issues. And I'm going to look at my staff members, or something else I should have said, Virginia. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I will say we're lucky because we have legislation that's mandating these reductions. Our mindset of many of our dairy families is, yes, we want to trial it, but there's a cost to doing that. We want to find the most efficient way of helping them get into trialing this with real numbers of cows to prove it out.
So let's go down to Giant, and we'll take this other question and work down the line.
Yeah. So
1 minute or so.
okay. So I think for farmer participation, there is a scope. Make him aware about all these things happening now. What is climate change and how the animals are contributing. Unless and until we take them in confidence, we cannot work with them. So this is one thing. And another thing is that we also need to have some technological support. Like we are also in India, we are working on consortia mode with National Dairy Development Board as well as Government of India for genomic selection of our indigenous breeds. So in that, we initially started with milk traits, but some adaptation trait also. And that will help again for selection of the better animal in our breeding program, so that animal will have more productivity. At the same time, we can reduce the number of animals. But in India, it is a difficult one. So sex-sorted semen is the technology where we can select the sex of our desire actually.
Thank you. Fiona, thoughts on this question?
Um, yeah, I tried to put it in a pastoral perspective. I mean, most pastoralists haven't even heard of the word methane, let alone understand it. And I think you'll also find a lot of the countries, the governments, are struggling to, if they have heard of the word methane, what it actually means. So certainly in Africa, there's a lot of catch up to do. But there are governments who really are engaging with it. I mean, for example, Kenya and Ethiopia, I mean, they're probably further ahead in thinking about how to reduce emissions as well as help livestock producers adapt. I just thought of something else and I can't remember what it is now. It's gone out of my head. Feeding? No. Yes. I mean, policy, we're definitely not at a place in Africa for regulations, policy and legislation. But I think there definitely is a place for raising awareness and unfortunately taking responsibility for the pollutants of livestock as well as the benefits. So Africa's definitely behind in thinking along and how to move this transition to lower emission production systems, but it will, and I think if it's coupled together with climate adaptation, I mean, pastoralists, I'm on a WhatsApp group of pastoralists, and they're already talking about it, but, they're scared. I mean, livestock production, I mean, livestock producers, they do a service for us by producing food, and this disruption, this added threat now, is a threat, and of course they're going to push against it. But yeah, I guess it's awareness raising that this is something that we do have to do together, and it needs changes amongst all of us. It's not pointing the finger, we should stop victimizing livestock and livestock producers. I don't think that's helpful.
Thank you. Karen, thoughts on that?
Well, I always have thoughts, but I want to share the podium.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, if there's space to fill, I'd be happy to comment.
Okay. I just would like to respond to our colleagues. We can say that the issues of each country, each region is different. It's a national context specific. And that's why each country, each regions, even though each livestock system is different, have a different need, different priorities. And that's why there's no one single solution fit all. And even though when we're talking about all options, interventions, it's not only you choose only one solution and you can solve all the problem. No, sometimes you need to implement all solutions, all actions, and you will see collective result. And one of the issues that we need to, I can give one example. Here, or other countries, when you're talking about methane, when you're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, but in India, farmers, they are selling them cow manure to the collecting centers. They have a manure collecting centers to produce biogas and also to produce biogas for kitchens or to generate electricity, the whole village. But farmers, they don't think about methane. But what they are selling to the manure collecting center, it means they get more income, can feed their family. And that's why the way of thinking is different, priority is different. Even though I can give, because I'm from Thailand, I can give 20 years back when livestock sector in Thailand started biogas program in pig farms, poultry farm, and dairy farms. At that time, we are talking about, because we know that um, waste from pig farm, when it go to the field, especially rice field, will have an impact because rice will not, you will not get any rice. You will have a lot of leaves. And that's why the solution, how to improve. And also the other thing that we gain from that program, it means you reduce the cost of production because you can generate electricity in your own farms. And you can reduce a lot. But when you talk about today, they say, now I can sell my carbon credit from my farms. Because you can see that all the issues, it changed from one country to another countries, from region to another regions, or even though from sector to other sectors. And that's why all solutions that we need to take now, and you will see result tomorrow. And tomorrow we will show the result and progress that we make.
Thank you, Karen, and then we're going to come to Irving.
I think I took your question a little bit differently. Like there's this tension between food security and climate change. And I would say the fact that we all are coming at this from different places, and those of us who are fortunate enough to be in a different position, like ag is not a big part of our GDP in California, but it's still essential to all of California. However, we also have resources and this investment fund that others don't. We should not let what's happening, because countries who are so overly dependent on that for livelihoods, as well as feeding their people, we should not let that become a way of watering down anything. It is understanding that we all need to work together to provide them tools and investment, but also it is not an excuse for those of us who can to do something. What the worst thing is to not do something. And so I just feel that also farmer to farmer learning and sharing, and we live in an age of technology where we can do it in ways that the good old days we had farmer to farmer trips, and that's still a fabulous way of learning. We have had such great experience, one good thing out of COVID, of sharing what we're learning on climate smart ag, and especially in the dairy and methane industry, by doing webinars that attracted global audiences. So we need to be supportive of one another, come to understandings of that, and where we can make the investments so that all of us can get there. It should never be like sacrifice some livelihoods and food security for this. We have to do climate change mitigation and adaptation, and we do have to feed people. So that's what I would suggest we think about.
Thank you. And Earthren, I'm sure you have thoughts on this question.
Very quickly, and I don't want to talk to, I'll stand up. We talked about this before. You know, we need to ensure that we have the kind of government incentives that you talked about that start the programs. But we also need to ensure that we are bringing more private sector capital to scale up what works, and scaling up those bio generators, scaling up the black soldier fly larvae facilities that will help us create more tools from food waste. Because it's really not all about cows, but the challenge that we have is that we have been working on this in a very disjointed way, which is why, and I'm going to blow your horn a little here, the EDF program, working with the companies, that is bringing together a coalition to support the work that is necessary. That begins to build the kind of case studies that we need to support action in other places. Because what you can demonstrate is that you can reduce methane while also addressing the issues of affordable food, that food prices do not increase when you have this kind of work, then it puts governments in a position of being much more amenable to supporting the policy requirements that you need, and it gives you something to sell to other countries.
Thank you so much. Jennifer, are there any announcements?
No, we do need to close because.
No, we're going to close.
Not to worry.
You know, we have announcements before we close. Okay.
Sorry, my whole day is like keeping us on time.
You're good at it.
Okay, no, we're good.
Friends are coming in soon, but I don't think there's any.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? We have a joint food water reception in the water pavilion at 6:30 to really drive home the water food linkages. So come join us. Right.
I have an announcement.
Okay, one more.
We held our first ever State of the Science on enteric fermentation in May with the University of California at Davis, and we had global speakers and participation. We will do our second one in May of 2024. The summary and some of the recommendations that came out of that summit were just published a couple of weeks ago, and that's available on our website. And the interest in this is very global, and I wanted to make sure that I call that to people's attention.
Okay, and another announcement.
Yep. One of the recommendations that we received from International Conference on Sustainable Livestock Transformation at the FAO in September next year, we try to make sure that we can launch Sustainable Livestock Transformation digital platform, that we can bring all solutions from different sectors, from different countries together, and we can see progress.
Okay, thank you. Well, what a great session. Please, yes. We actually don't have time. I'm sorry, I've already been told, but perhaps as we exit, you can approach one or more of our panelists. Sorry. So thanks for participating. Thank you for the panelists, and please join me in thanking them with a round of applause.